Let me share a screen. Again, we're doing Sefer Yetzira tonight. And we are doing the first Mishnah in Sefer Yetzira. The first chapter in Sefer Yetzira, the 12th Mishnah. It's getting towards the end of the chapter. But in any event, I think there are 14 in this chapter. So we're on 12 tonight. We have been following since the beginning of this particular chapter deals with the concept of the sefirot hagnuzot, the hidden sefirot, and we explained that these are the hidden sefirot, the sefirot in the light. These are not the sefirot of the kelim, of the vessels, but the sefirot in the light. There are other explanations which explain things somewhat differently, but in any event, that's the approach that we have been taking. I'll read the Hebrew as usual, and then the English translation from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. I don't always agree with his translation, but nevertheless, the translation is a valid one from the point of view of sound is a little low. Oh, is that better now? Let's see if I can just move there a bit closer. Let's see here, 1 second. No, that'll change it. Yeah, is that better? I'm not sure that anyone is having the same problem, but we will see. Okay. I hope that's a little bit better now. In any event, Aryeh Kaplan. Is everyone having the same problem? Yeah, better now. Okay, good. Okay. So Aryeh, let me just read the Hebrew again. Arba. This is the fourth level that we're going to be speaking about, and I'll explain what that is. Eish mimayim, fire from water. Chakak v'chatzav, he engraved and he carved. Ba, in it, kiseh hakavoid, the throne of glory. Srafim, we're now going to read the names of the various categories of angels. They're called Srafim, Voifanim, Vachayot HaKodesh, Umalachei HaSharis. Srafim, the angels of the world of Briya. I'll explain this in more detail later. Ufanim are the angels of the world of Asiya, Chayot HaKodesh, are the angels of the world of Yetzirah. Malach HaSharis are also angels from the world of Briya, but permanent angels. The Srafim are not permanent. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about the concept of angels shortly. And from these three, not these three categories of angels, but from the three things that we mentioned here, Aish, water and air, and interestingly, air is not actually mentioned, but we'll get to that later. Yasad Mo'eno, he established his dwelling, his place of residence. Shenemar, as it says, Ois Malacha Ruchos, he made his angels of air. Mesharasav, his servants, Eish Lohit, burning fire. His ministers of flaming fire. Okay, 4, fire from water, with it he engraved and carved the throne of glory. Srafim Ufanim Holy Chayot, and ministering angels. From these three he found his dwelling, as it is written, he made his angels of breath, his minister of flaming fire. Okay. I'll leave that up there so that you can follow along. When we speak about number 4, what do we mean by number 4? So we explained right in the beginning that when we talk about number 1, we're talking about Keter. Number 2 would be Chokhmah. Number 3 would be Bina. And therefore, number 4 would actually be Chesed. However, here, as we will see, we are talking about Chesed and Gevurah together. Now, when do Chesed and Gevurah come together? They come together in the sefira of Daat. Now, normally when we talk about Keter, we don't talk about Daat. because there's 10 sefirot, and if you count Daat, there's 11 sefirot. So when Keter is mentioned, in other words, the original source of everything, then we don't mention the source which is called Daat. We just mention the manifestation of Daat in Chesed and in Gevurah, in kindness and in severity, the two sefirot of Chesed and Gevurah. Actually, I suppose I should have brought up a chart. As usual, I didn't think of that before. Okay, 1 second, I will get there. Here we go. All right, just briefly, we'll get the chart going. I'm assuming that everyone can see the chart. As you can see, there's Keter, Chochmah, Bina, and then Daat. Daat itself divides into Chesed and Gevurah. So Chesed and Gevurah are really the manifestation of Daat. In Daat itself, Daat is sort of divided into two. It is, Daat in the human soul is the concept of, essentially the concept of discernment. What does discernment do? A person who discerns, a discerning person, is one who can divide, who can distinguish between one thing and another. So Daat is that ability to distinguish between one thing and another. And in terms of the sefirot, it's also the power, well, first of all, it's the power of consciousness, that's number one. But it's also the power of being able to distinguish. That was the concept of the sin of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. There's nothing wrong with knowledge. It's called Eitz HaDa'at, the tree of Daat, knowledge of good and evil. But knowledge doesn't really cut the mustard. It doesn't explain really what it is. Knowledge is not just information. Knowledge is the ability to discern, the ability to know right from wrong, the ability to discern between right and wrong. That's what Daat is. Daat is essentially discernment. And therefore, it's also consciousness, because one can be conscious of certain things and not conscious of others. In other words, consciousness is kind of a focus on certain things. That's also the concept of Daat. But here, as the fourth sefira, we are speaking about Daat more as it's not as Daat itself, but as it's manifested in Chesed and Gevurah. And that is why we start to explain the concept of fire from water. Let me just, this is Chesed and Gevurah. Chesed and Gevurah. Chesed is, what happened to that? Sorry. Yeah, we're back. The concept of fire from water. Fire from water is, what is water? Water is the sefira of Chesed. It's compared to the sefira of Chesed. Water represents the idea, generally it represents the idea of kindness, of bringing water to someone, as we know the story, with the story of how Jacob found his beloved Rachel. She was the one that came and brought water to his flocks. She brought water. She's the epitome of kindness. So that's the idea. Water always represents kindness, whereas fire represents Gevurah. What's Gevurah? Gevurah is that which divides things into small, much smaller. It's divisive. Gevurah, not necessarily in a negative sense, but it divides things into smaller elements, smaller particles, so to speak. That's the concept of Gevurah. So whereas water, as we know, if you put water into flour, let's say, it causes the flour to all stick together, because that's the concept of water, bringing things together, the concept of Chesed. Whereas fire is exactly the opposite. It's something which divides things into its constituent elements in order to return a thing to the state of powder or whatever it is. The water has to be burnt off and so on and so forth. That's the concept of fire. So anything, if you want to easily crush something, first heat it up and get rid of the water and so on and so forth, then it's much easier to crush it to its constituent elements and so on. So that's these are the two concepts that we start off explaining. Eish mimayim, that the fire actually comes from water. Now, there is in various Hasidic texts, it says, but not in any of the versions of the Sefer Yetzira that we have, but in these Hasidic texts, it says the following, that he brought out water from fire. Sorry, he brought out fire from water and water from fire. What we mean to say, what those texts mean to say, is that these two elements do not work they work in contrast as well, but they do not work in opposition to each other as much as they work in tandem with each other. In other words, they work together. How do we see just in a physical example of water and fire together? Well, when you heat water, right? Or obviously when one extinguishes fire with water. But when you heat the water, the water with fire, that improves the water. If you want to make tea or coffee, obviously, if you want to just drink cold water, that's different. But in any event, there is a working together of fire and water, or water and fire. Now, conceptually, the idea is that water without limitation, in other words, basically the concept of a flood, is not something positive. Therefore, it has to have its limitations. And the limitation of water is through fire. And we don't mean it then in a literal sense through fire. We just mean that the limitation of Chesed is through Gevurah. And that is properly the way it should be. Because Chesed, kindness, can reward bad behavior. If a person always shows a tremendous amount of kindness without any concept of Gevurah, of, I don't want to say harshness, but at least restraint or withholding, then the results can be very, very negative. Kindness itself is a positive thing. But when kindness is mishandled or misguided, let's see, put it that way, when kindness is misguided or mishandled, then what could happen is that the kindness becomes, can even become cruelty. In other words, if, let's put it in classical terms, if the wicked are not punished, then the wicked thrive. Now, we're not talking necessarily about punishment, but we are talking about consequences for certain types of behavior. Everybody who has children knows that you want to show your kindness to your children, but at certain times you have to restrain them. You can't let them eat cake all day, even though out of kindness you would want to. You have to restrain them. So Eish and Mayim and Eish, water and fire, work together. In other words, Chesed and Gevurah work together. The fire tempers the water. Gevurah tempers Chesed. And on the same side, as in the Hasidic analogy, water acts on fire as well. Water limits the fire. In other words, that kindness tempers the harsh nature of Gevurah. Chesed tends to temper the harsh nature of Gevurah. Gevurah on its own, overbearing harshness, is obviously a negative thing. But when the intention of the Gevurah, of the harshness, is a kindness, as for example, restraining our kids from eating too much cake or something like that, or eating too many candies and so on, that is a positive result. So Eish and Mayim and Eish work together. Chesed and Gevurah always work together. So you may ask, how is it possible for two completely opposite elements, Chesed and Gevurah, to work together? Well, the truth is that in the world of Tikkun, they are not, in fact, opposites. Let me bring up the sefira chart again. I hope that you can see it. Just let me know in the chat if you can see it. Why not to see the chat? Oh, here we go. Can you see it in the chat? Yeah? Okay. So you can see now. Now, Chesed and Gevurah over here, in the world of Tikkun, Chesed and Gevurah are opposite qualities, but not necessarily opposing qualities. In the world of Tohu, in the world of chaos, the world that existed prior to the world of Tikkun, there were only two columns of the sefirot. All the sefirot were arrayed in only two columns. There was no middle column at all. Here we see that we're talking about the middle column as it is, as Daat, as Chesed and Gevurah are contained within Daat. And as Chesed and Gevurah become manifested in Tiferet. Tiferet also amalgamates Chesed and Gevurah together so that they operate as one entity. In the world of Tohu, that's not possible because Chesed is absolute Chesed and Gevurah is absolute Gevurah. So it's not possible for them to operate together. How do they operate together in the world of Tikkun? They operate together because of the middle column. In other words, basically, the way it's explained by the commentaries is that within Chesed, there's an element of Gevurah. Within Gevurah, there's an element of Chesed. And those elements of Chesed and Gevurah within its opposite, the Gevurah within Chesed and the Chesed within Gevurah, that is a hallmark of the world of Tikkun. That in the world of Tikkun, things are not absolutes. In the world of Tikkun, each aspect, each midah, as it's called, each quality, characteristic, is mitigated and tempered by its opposite. Why? Because it has within itself the concept of Gevurah. Chesed has within it Gevurah, and Gevurah has within it the concept of Chesed. And therefore, they could be joined together. They could come together. Now, the concept of division between two things can happen in two ways. If there's absolute division between two things, that's the world of Tohu. And if the division is only a relative division, in other words, a division of tasks, which is what happens in the world of Tohu. In the world of Tikkun. The world of Tohu, it's absolute division. There's no meeting of the minds. It's west and east, and never the twain shall meet. But in the world of Tikkun, they do work together. The division is a division of labor. It's not a division of essence. It's not an essential division in that sense. And all of this is actually coming to talk about, to a certain extent, the concept of how the lights enter into their respective vessels, how the light of Chesed enters into the Kli of Chesed, but the light of Gevurah also enters into the Kli of Chesed. All the lights of all the sefirot enter into each of the sefirot. In other words, in Chesed, you have Chochmah of Chesed, you have Bina of Chesed. I should have started off from the beginning. You have Keter of Chesed, you have Chochmah of Chesed, Bina of Chesed, Chesed of Chesed, and Gevurah of Chesed. We see this particularly during the time of what is called Sfirat HaOmer. Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. There are 49 days between Passover and Shavuot. Shavuot is the festival of the receiving of the Torah. When the Torah was received, that was on the 50th day. But all the 49 days before, we count and we start off with Chesed Shebechesed, and then we go to Gevurah Shebechesed, Tiferet Shebechesed, etc. Every week, we count the 6 days of the 7, or the 7 days of the week. We count all of the sefirot: Chesed of Chesed, Gevurah of Chesed, Tiferet of Chesed, Netzach of Chesed, Hod of Chesed, Yesod of Chesed, and Malchus of Chesed. In other words, all of the sefirot of the world of Tikkun are comprised of all of the sefirot in themselves. Yes, it's true that in Chesed, Chesed is the dominating aspect. In Gevurah, Gevurah is the dominating aspect. That doesn't mean to say that there's no Chesed in the sefira of Gevurah in the world of Tikkun. And that is the difference between them. One of the explanations also points out that when we're talking about water and fire and so on and so forth, we are talking about the three patriarchs. Abraham is the concept of water. Abraham is Mayim, because Abraham is the concept of Chesed. Yitzchak is the concept, Isaac is the concept of fire, Eish. And Yaakov is the concept of Ruach, air. Okay, that's the that is one of the explanations. In any event, let's move this now and go back to our here. With it, he engraved and carved. What's the concept of engraved and carved? Well, we've spoken about this before. There's engraving and carving. Engraving is when you engrave into, let's say, a stone or a metal plate. It's part of the metal plate, much more part of the metal plate than writing upon it. Writing upon it can easily be erased. Engraving is not so easy to erase. It can't be erased, essentially, unless you pour, let's say, if it's a silver plate, you pour more silver into it and you cover it over, but whatever. But engraving generally is not something that can be erased. But carving is a much deeper thing. Carving is the thing itself. It's carved into a certain shape, let's say the shape of a letter or the shape of whatever it may happen to be. The carving changes the essence of the thing. It is now a particular object that has been carved in this particular way, and cannot be changed without changing the essence of the thing. So therefore, what was it that that he carved? He carved the Kiseh HaKavod, the throne of glory. Now, what the throne of glory means, there are numerous explanations of what the throne of glory is, and all of them are correct. It's just that we're talking about different levels. In some cases, the throne of glory is talking about the revelation of the inner dimension of Keter, which is called Atik, in Bina. Sometimes Kiseh HaKavod refers to Chochmah and Bina themselves. Sometimes it refers to, actually, I should have said before, Arich Anpin. Sometimes it refers to Chochmah and Bina. Sometimes it refers only to Bina, which is the Kiseh, the throne for Chochmah, and so on and so forth. There's many others. Kiseh HaKavod is also Zer Anpin, and Kiseh HaKavod is also Malchut. All of these are valid explanations. But here, it seems to us that the most, the explanation which applies in this particular case is that we're talking about the world of Briya. That the Kiseh is called the world of Briya. In the vision of Ezekiel, in the first chapter of Ezekiel, when he sees the throne of glory, he sees the chariot, and on the chariot is a throne. The chariot itself represents the world of Yetzirah, and the throne represents the world of Briya. And the figure on the throne represents the world of Atzilut, the 10 sefirot of the world of Atzilut. So when we're talking about the throne itself, we're talking about the world of Briya. The world of Briya, which is the throne, in other words, the place upon which the world of Atzilut, so to speak, sits. In other words, there's a revelation to a certain extent in the world of Briya of the world of Atzilut. It's not a complete revelation, and that's why the word Kiseh is used. Kiseh meaning, again, throne. That's how it's usually translated. It also means chair. But the word Kiseh actually comes from the word case. Let me see if I can write this on the board here. Here we go. All right. I hope you can see this. The word Kiseh is spelled like this. Kiseh. Sorry, I'm running with a mouse, so it is a little bit not so good. So Kiseh, the word Kiseh. I put a line in between the two because the concept is, case is from the word kisui, which means to cover up. To cover up. What is covered up? The Aleph. The Aleph stands for Alufo Shel Olam, the master of the world. Right? Alufo Shel Olam. Alufo Shel Olam, in other words, Hashem. The case, the Kiseh, is to a certain extent covering the manifestation of godliness within Briya. It's covered up. It's not like it is in the world of Atzilut, which is where godliness is revealed. In the world of Briya, godliness is somewhat concealed. It's within, it's on the throne, but the throne itself covers up the essence of the revelation. That is why it says about Amalek. In the time of Amalek, we spoke about Amalek in a previous class, a few classes ago. The concept of Amalek attempts to disjoint, remove this aleph from the kisei. So that's why our sages say, Ein ha-kisei sholem, ve'ein Hashem sholem. The kisei, the throne, is not whole, God's throne, so to speak. In other words, his divine revelation is not complete until Amalek will be eradicated. Because Amalek stands for the concept of concealing divinity, concealing godliness. Okay, let's go back to, if I could just 1 second. Okay, if I could just go back to share screen here and back to the, okay, here we go. So engrave and carve the throne of glory. And then he goes on to speak about the throne of glory is surrounded by, in the vision of Ezekiel, is surrounded by various categories of angels. And these categories, and by the way, I should have mentioned that the fact that godliness is concealed in the world of Briya, somewhat concealed, is part of the intention. Why? Because if godliness would be revealed, the world of Briya, which is the first world of actual existence, the world of Atzilus is not actual. Atzilus is not actual existence. It's a transcendent world. It's a world of divine revelation. In order for there to be a manifestation of the physical, even though in Briya it's not yet called physical, but it's nevertheless called yesh mi'ayin, ex nihilo, or something from nothing, that's the world of Briya, the world of creation. It's something that's created from nothing. In other words, it's there, it exists. The concept of existence is what God wanted there to be, that the godliness should be revealed even within existence, and not just the existence of the world of Briya, but existence of the lowest aspects of the world of Asiya, which is 2 worlds down. That's a concept which is called Nitav HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yesu V'Adiri B'Tachtonim. It's a Midrash Tanchuma, Parshas Naso, that explains that God desired a dwelling place in the lower world. He wanted the ultimate of godliness to be revealed in the physical, on the physical plane, so that the physical plane itself becomes godly. That's what he wanted. Why he wanted it is a whole other question. That's really a question that we can't answer. But in any event, that's what he wanted. So to go back now to the throne is surrounded by various sorts of angels. The highest level of angels, the angels of the world, actually there's 4 levels of angels. There's the angels of the world of Atzilut, which are called abstract intellect, sichlim nivdolim, abstract intellect. In other words, they're conceptual angels. They're not really angels with a body, so to speak. They're only angels of light, so to speak. There's no body, so to speak, of the angel. When we say body, we obviously don't mean a physical body. We mean how shall I say it? There's a certain limitation. There's a certain concept of being when it comes to an angel. So the angels of the world of Briya are called Srafim. Srafim from the word, seraphim, I suppose in English, but it comes from the word lisrof, which means to burn, right? Burning. In other words, they're burning. These are, for example, there are those that explain that the burning bush, what was revealed at the burning bush was initially this angel, and that's why the bush wasn't burned. It was the revelation of a saraf. There's some that explain it like that, but that's not the main explanation, because what was revealed there was something even much higher than angel. It was actually communication with Moses of divine. There was divine communication. But in any event, the seraphim are these angels which are burning up, so to speak. What does it mean that they're burning up? They're always longing to exit their status and move up to a higher level. Just as we see, fire always burns upwards, seeking, so to speak, to leave the wick or the match or whatever it's burning from. It's always burning upwards and leaping upwards. That's the concept of the angels. These types of angels, they're always striving upwards to be nullified from down below and to merge into their original source. The holy chayot, sometimes translated in English as the holy animals. Well, that's not inappropriate, but anyway, these holy angels, and those are the angels of the world of Yetzirah, which are represented by the four sides of the Merkava, the four sides of the chariot: the face of a lion, the face of an ox, the face of an eagle, and the face of man, which is sort of, so to speak, the animal element of man, rather than the godly element. And finally, we have the Ophanim, the cyclical angels. Ophanim means really cycles, which are in the world of Asiya. Asiya is a much more cyclical place than the world of Yetzirah, which is much more linear, so to speak. I don't want to get into that. It's too much of a mathematical concept and so on and so forth. In any event, beyond those are the ministering angels. The ministering angels are also from the world of Briya, but they are angels that are permanent. These are the angels Michael, Gabriel, and so on and so forth. Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Nuriel, depending on which one we're talking about. And there's various angels that are the permanent angels. Angels are only messengers, and therefore, once the message has been delivered, or once the mission has been accomplished, that angel no longer exists. Usually the angels are more temporary, but there are the ministering angels that are permanent angels: Michael, Gabriel, and so on and so forth. Also corresponding to the sefirot, Raphael, and so on. Okay, let's continue. From these three, he founded his dwelling. First of all, when we say dwelling, what do we mean by dwelling? The dwelling is where godliness can be manifested. So there's various explanations of what these three are talking about. One explanation of the three is referring to these angels, which come from air, water, and fire. Three types of angels, or simply the concepts of air, water, and fire, which are Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet. Chesed, water, fire, Gevurah, and Ruach, Tiferet. Or alternatively, there are those that explain referring to Keta, Chochmah, Bina, or to Bina, Tiferet, Malchut. There's various explanations. We don't really need to go into this at great length, but the housing, the ma'on, the dwelling, the divine dwelling, is a place which is essentially the divine dwelling is the sefirot of Zer Anpin, the 6 sefirot from Chesed to Yesod, because they express the dimensions of space. There are 6 sides to space, as we know. There's up and down, right and left, back and front. So the 6 sides of space are representative of the concept of Zer Anpin. And godliness, for godliness to be manifested in Ma'ono, in Zer Anpin, that is the goal. Others explain that Ma'ono means the sefira of Malchut, which is established and revealed by by Zer Anpin. So Rabbi Chaim Vital was the I don't know if you can call him the secretary, but he was the star Talmid, the student of the Arizal, but the one who wrote down all of his teachings. He was the redactor of the teachings of the Arizal. The famous Rabbi Chaim Vital wrote all the works of the Arizal. The Arizal himself wrote very, very little. In any event, Rabbi Chaim Vital says when he comes to verse which we're about to quote, his angels of breath and his ministers of flaming fire, he says it only mentions two of the foundations. It only mentions air and fire. It does not mention the concept of water. And he asks why that should possibly be. So he says his answer is that we're talking about water from air and fire from water, and therefore everything is mentioned. In other words, we're talking about the derivation of the various sefirot from one another, and that's the way he explains it. In any event, this doesn't need to be necessarily a question. It's only that this verse is brought as a support. It's not a proof necessarily, but that the angels are of two main types. Those angels that are represented by air, those angels that are represented by fire, and of course there are angels as well that are represented by water. That's mentioned in other verses. In any event, that is the Mishnah. Just to summarize, the fourth level is the level of Daat, which includes Chesed and Gevurah. Chesed and Gevurah are mentioned in the Mishnah as fire, that's Gevurah, and water, that's Chesed. So from them, these two opposites actually combine, and water brings forth fire, and fire brings forth water. In other words, within Chesed itself, you will find Gevurah. Within Gevurah itself, you will find Chesed, because we're talking here about the world of Tikkun. The world of Tikkun is that world of rectification, the world in which we draw down the revelation of godliness. And the revelation of godliness comes when opposites unite, and when one can find in oneself the opposite as well. In other words, if one is a person who's particularly kind, one can call up the quality of Gevurah, of restraint, or with being withdrawn, or whatever, where necessary, and vice versa. In other words, a complete person is not a person who's always one-sided, but a person who has all of the qualities, and where all of the qualities work together. In a more spiritual sense, this is talking about how the various lights attach to the vessels, because the light of Chesed attaches to the Chesed of that particular vessel, even though all of the lights are found in that vessel. In the vessel of Chesed, the light of Chesed, because it is the concept of Chesed, is manifested primarily in the vessel of Chesed, and therefore shines through it. Similarly with Gevurah, in the sefira of Gevurah, the primary aspect is Gevurah. Nevertheless, all the other aspects are also represented, but the aspect of the light that is picked up, so to speak, is the aspect of Gevurah in the Kli, and that's how it works. But nevertheless, since it's the world of Tikkun, all of them have all of the qualities. And therefore they could all unite together. Chesed is not absolute Chesed, and Gevurah is not absolute Gevurah. They Chesed and Gevurah that amalgamate. They come from a source together, from Daat, and they amalgamate again in their operation in Tiferet. That basically is the Mishnah of that is the Mishnah number 12 of the first chapter of Sefer Yetzira. Okay, there seem to be a couple of questions over here that I probably missed. Well, one question. Ma'itavel, Chesed in Gevurah. Yes, but Mezahav is actually, gold is actually from the side of Gevurah. I don't know. I'd have to look this up a little bit more and see what the Zohar has to say on it, and what the Arizal has to say. But that's what strikes me, is that Mezahav is Gevurah, but probably the opposite is Chesed. What would fire and look like in Zer Anpin as angels? Yeah, there could be angels. It could be angels, but Zer Anpin would be Chesed Gevurah. The Chesed and Gevurah of Zer Anpin. Water and fire, actually, this material representative of the angelic forces. Again, these terms. Yeah, gold is from Gevurah, I guess. That's why South Africa is a place of gold. It's a country of Gevurah. I grew up there, so I know. It is a country of Gevurah, at least when I was living there. Yes, and gold represents Gevurah. That's why it's heavy. It seeks the gold is the heaviest element, I believe. In any event, when we're talking about the representations in Chesed and Gevurah using water and fire, these are only representations. They're sort of analogies. They're metaphors. They're not something that should be taken literally. We just use fire and water to be able to understand what it is that we're talking about. Since we have experience with fire and water, we don't have experience with angels or the Chesed and Gevurah, all the more so, obviously in their pristine state. Therefore, we have to use analogies, and the analogies are from our own human experience. Okay, any other questions? All right, so again, there will likely be a class tomorrow night. I'll just tell you a quick story to finish off over here. It's a famous story about Reb Yonasan Eberschutz, who was a very, very, very intelligent and sharp-witted person. He also happened to be advisor to the king. I think it was in Prague, if I'm not mistaken. He was in Prague. He was the rabbi of the city of Prague, which is Czechoslovakia. So there was the king of Czechoslovakia, appointed a number of different advisors, and he was one of the advisors. One day he was walking in the street. He was going from his house, and he was intending to go to the synagogue. And the carriage of the king rolled by. The king sees Rabbi Yonasan Eberschutz, and he stopped his carriage, rolled down the window, whatever, how they did it, whatever. He put down the window, and he said to Rabbi Yonasan, where are you going? So Rabbi Yonasan Eberschutz answered, I don't really know. I don't know where I'm going. So the Tsar thought that the king rather thought that this was a bit odd, and not only odd, but rather rude. In fact, it was chutzpah. And he didn't like it, so he told his, the soldiers guarding his coach to arrest Rabbi Yonasan Eberschutz and put him in prison and give him time to cool down and to think about his response. Anyway, later in the day, the king goes to visit Rabbi Yonasan in prison, and he said, what you said to me was inappropriate. I am, after all, the king. And to tell me you don't know where you're going, I mean, come on, you don't know where you're going, what are you talking about? So Rabbi Yonasan said to him as follows. He said, listen, I could tell you where I was planning on going, but I cannot tell you where I was going, and you see the proof of it right here. I was planning on going to the synagogue or to the house of study. Synagogue, house of study, usually in those times is often synonymous, but not necessarily. In any event, I was going to the synagogue or the house of study, and you see where I landed up. I landed up in jail. I didn't know where I was going. I could tell you where I was planning on going, but not where I was going. But you asked me where I was going, and I told you I don't know. And you see that that's true. I did not know. I had no idea that I would land up in jail. The king liked the answer very much, and he, of course, freed Rabbi Yonasan Eberschutz. Why I'm telling you the story is we never know what may happen. Tomorrow may not work out. I'm planning on a class tomorrow, but things may intervene. I don't think they will, but in any event, I am planning, and hopefully we will. There is information on which planets relate to which sefira. Yeah, there are. Perhaps in a future class we'll go into that. Okay, let's leave it at that, and hopefully I will see you tomorrow night. All the best, everybody.